Welcome back to Avoidant Decoded. If you're ready to understand the deeper psychology of avoidant behavior and build connections that actually work, you're in the right place. Before we dive in, make sure to join the membership to get exclusive insights and deeper breakdowns you won't find anywhere else. The avoidant attachment style is shaped by a quiet but powerful set of inner fantasies that guide who they're drawn to and how they experience desire, often without them even realizing it. These patterns come from unresolved emotional wounds and unmet needs, creating triggers that can slip past their usual defenses when understood and approached the right way. When someone learns to align with these deeper psychological desires, it can create a strong pull that makes the avoidant lean in with an intensity that feels unexpected, even to them. What makes this dynamic so complex is the gap between what they say they want and what they actually respond to on a deeper level. On the surface, they talk about needing space, independence, and emotional distance, but underneath, there's a strong desire for connection that feels safe, steady, and free from pressure. They are drawn to someone who can offer closeness without making them feel trapped or overwhelmed. When a person naturally reflects this balance, they begin to represent the resolution to the avoidant's internal struggle, and that's what makes them so compelling. One of the strongest fantasies they carry is the idea of a partner who is emotionally grounded and self-reliant. At their core, avoidants fear becoming responsible for someone else's emotional world. The thought of having to constantly reassure, support, or carry another person's feelings feels exhausting to them. Because of this, they are deeply attracted to individuals who are secure within themselves, people who don't depend on the relationship to feel stable or complete. When someone shows real emotional independence, it creates a sense of relief for the avoidant. It signals that connection can exist without pressure. This kind of presence doesn't rise and fall based on how much attention the avoidant gives. Instead, it stays steady. Whether the avoidant is close or distant, the emotionally grounded person remains calm, fulfilled, and centered. That consistency is incredibly attractive because it removes the fear of being emotionally drained, but this independence has to be real. Avoidants are surprisingly perceptive when it comes to emotional authenticity. They can sense when someone is pretending to be strong while secretly craving validation or rescue. If the independence is just a mask, it breaks the illusion of safety. What draws them in is genuine emotional maturity, the kind that doesn't need constant reassurance and doesn't chase when distance appears. Someone who embodies this doesn't panic when the avoidant pulls away. They don't overanalyze the relationship or demand constant clarity about the future. Instead, they continue living their life fully. This creates a dynamic where connection feels optional rather than required, and that's exactly what makes it feel safe for the avoidant. They don't want to feel needed, they want to feel chosen. There's a huge difference. Being needed feels like pressure. Being chosen feels like freedom. Another powerful fantasy revolves around mystery and challenge. Avoidants are naturally drawn to depth and complexity. They don't feel engaged by someone who is completely transparent from the beginning or overly eager to reveal everything at once. When someone is too easy to understand, the intrigue fades quickly. What captures their attention is a person with layers, someone whose personality, thoughts, and experiences unfold over time. This isn't about playing games or being distant on purpose. It's about having a rich inner world, personal passions, and a sense of identity that doesn't revolve entirely around the relationship. The avoidant wants to feel like they are discovering someone gradually, not being handed the full picture right away. This sense of mystery also comes from having boundaries. A person who maintains their own space, friendships, and interests creates a natural sense of intrigue. They aren't immediately available for everything, and they don't open every door at once. This makes the connection feel alive, like there's always something new to understand or experience. Part of this dynamic also involves a subtle level of challenge. Avoidants are drawn to people who don't automatically adjust themselves to fit their preferences. When someone has their own opinions, makes independent choices, and occasionally prioritizes their own life, it creates a kind of tension that keeps the avoidant engaged. It's not about conflict, but about presence and individuality. They also tend to value what feels earned. When affection is given too easily or too quickly, it can trigger suspicion. It may come across as desperation rather than genuine connection. But when someone takes their time, allowing the relationship to develop naturally, it feels more meaningful and trustworthy to them. Deep down, avoidants also carry a quiet longing to be truly seen without being judged. This is one of their most hidden desires. They want someone who can look past their distance, their need for space, and their emotional walls, and still understand them without trying to fix or change them. They don't want to be pushed into opening up before they're ready. They don't want their need for space to be misunderstood as rejection. What they crave is someone who can hold a sense of calm understanding, someone who doesn't take their withdrawal personally, but sees it as part of how they regulate themselves. When a person responds to their distance with patience instead of pressure, it creates a sense of safety that is rare for them. It tells them that they can be themselves without losing the connection, and that's when something shifts, because for once they're not being chased, judged, or forced to change. They're simply being understood. When all of these elements come together, emotional independence, a sense of depth and mystery, and quiet, non-judgmental understanding, it creates a powerful dynamic. The avoidant begins to feel drawn in, rather than pushed away. The connection no longer feels like a threat to their freedom, but something that fits naturally into their world. And when that happens, their behavior changes. They become more curious, more engaged, and more willing to move closer. Not because they were convinced or persuaded, but because something about the connection finally feels safe enough to explore. When you begin to see their distance not as rejection, but as a way they protect their ability to stay connected at all, your entire response shifts. The person who can calmly say, "Take the time you need, I'll be here when you're ready," becomes deeply reassuring to an avoidant. That kind of understanding removes pressure and replaces it with trust. This acceptance also applies to how avoidants communicate. They are often more comfortable expressing care through actions instead of words. They may not say everything out loud, but they show up, they remember small details, they offer help in practical ways, and they stay consistent in subtle ways that matter. When someone can recognize and appreciate these quiet expressions instead of demanding verbal proof, it creates an environment where the avoidant feels safe enough to keep giving in the way that feels natural to them. A person who embodies this role doesn't try to fix the avoidant or highlight what they lack. Instead, they acknowledge what they do well. They notice their independence, their capability, and their ability to manage themselves emotionally. By focusing on these strengths rather than pushing them to be more expressive or vulnerable, the avoidant no longer feels like they are constantly being judged or evaluated. That pressure fades, and in its place comes a sense of ease. At a deeper level, avoidants often carry a quiet sense of shame about how they relate in relationships. They are aware, even if they don't admit it, that they don't always express love in the ways people expect. Because of this, they long for someone who can see past that and still recognize their capacity to care. When someone notices the softer parts they keep hidden and validates them without forcing them into the open, it creates a bond that feels rare and difficult to replace. Another powerful dynamic they are drawn to is the presence of a steady and reliable partner, someone who feels like a safe place rather than a source of pressure. This comes from early experiences where expressing needs may have led to disappointment or rejection. As a result, they crave stability, but without the expectation that they must immediately match that level of openness. To embody this, consistency matters more than intensity. Being emotionally available without demanding the same level of vulnerability in return allows the avoidant to move at their own pace. When they reach out, you respond with warmth and steadiness. When they pull back, you don't punish them or make them feel guilty. You remain grounded and predictable, creating a sense of safety that doesn't disappear just because they needed space. This kind of presence is calm and reliable. It doesn't swing between extremes or create unnecessary drama. The avoidant feels more at ease around someone who is emotionally stable because it allows them to slowly lower their guard. They don't feel like they have to constantly monitor the situation or prepare for sudden emotional shifts. Reliability also shows up in practical ways. Keeping your word, being on time, following through on commitments, and handling your life responsibly all contribute to this sense of stability. Avoidants are naturally drawn to people who are capable and self-sufficient because it reassures them that the relationship won't turn into something they have to carry. They want someone who adds to their life, not someone who complicates it. Within this dynamic, intimacy grows gradually. There's no rush, no pressure to move faster than what feels comfortable. The avoidant is given the space to step closer and step back when needed, without being made to feel guilty for it. This gentle pacing makes deeper connection feel possible rather than overwhelming. Another layer of their attraction centers around equality. Avoidants are drawn to people who stand on their own, individuals who have their own direction, ambitions, and sense of purpose. They don't want to feel like they are someone's entire world or the source of their identity. This is why personal growth and independence are so important. Having your own goals, passions, and projects creates a sense of fulfillment that exists outside the relationship. When the avoidant sees that you are building a life that is already meaningful, it shifts how they perceive you. You become someone they can walk beside, not someone they have to carry. They also value connection that feels balanced on an intellectual and emotional level. They want someone whose thoughts they respect, whose perspective challenges them in a healthy way, and whose presence adds something meaningful to their world. It's not about competition or proving worth, but about mutual respect and stimulation. A strong sense of individuality is part of this as well. Maintaining your own friendships, interests, and social life shows that you are not relying on the relationship to meet every need. This takes away pressure and allows the connection to feel lighter and more natural. When all of these qualities come together, understanding, patience, independence, stability, and equality, something shifts inside the avoidant. The relationship no longer feels like a threat to their freedom or emotional safety. Instead, it begins to feel like something that fits into their life without taking it over. And in that space, they start to lean in, not because they were pushed or convinced, but because for the first time, the connection feels safe enough to stay. Having a life outside the relationship matters more than most people realize. When someone maintains strong friendships, family connections, and personal activities that don't revolve around the avoidant, it shows that they won't become emotionally or socially dependent. This kind of independence allows the avoidant to keep their own freedom without feeling guilty or responsible for someone else's world shrinking. This balance also extends into practical areas of life. Avoidants are more comfortable in relationships where both people handle their responsibilities and contribute equally. They don't want to feel like they are carrying someone, and they also don't want to feel controlled or obligated by being supported in a way that creates imbalance. What feels safest to them is a dynamic where both individuals stand on their own while sharing life together. Another strong pull for them is the idea of a partner who enjoys life as an experience, someone who values growth, exploration, and newness. They are naturally drawn to people who are curious about the world, who seek out new ideas, places, and challenges without needing constant emotional validation along the way. They don't want every shared moment to turn into a deep emotional discussion or a relationship checkpoint. Instead, they want to enjoy experiences for what they are. To reflect this, it's important to genuinely engage in life in a way that isn't dependent on the relationship. Pursuing hobbies, learning new skills, trying new environments, and staying mentally curious all signal that your energy comes from within. Avoidants are attracted to people who move through life with their own sense of direction and enthusiasm. There's also a simplicity they appreciate during shared experiences. They don't want to feel like they need to constantly check in emotionally or maintain a certain level of intensity. Being able to enjoy a moment without turning it into something deeper allows them to relax and stay present. They value someone who can be fully engaged in the experience itself rather than using it as a way to push the relationship forward. At the same time, they are drawn to individuals who bring something new into their life. Someone who has their own ideas, introduces different perspectives, and suggests experiences they wouldn't have thought of adds a sense of freshness and stimulation. This kind of presence makes the connection feel exciting rather than predictable. But none of this works if it's forced. Trying to act a certain way just to trigger attraction will almost always backfire. Avoidants are highly sensitive to anything that feels unnatural or strategic. If something seems like a role being played instead of a genuine way of being, they tend to pull back even more. The real approach is not about pretending, but about becoming. Developing emotional balance, independence, depth, patience, and curiosity in a real way creates the kind of presence that naturally draws them in. It's not something that needs to be announced or displayed dramatically. It shows through consistent behavior over time. Timing also plays a role. These qualities don't need to be revealed all at once. In fact, they are far more effective when they unfold naturally. The avoidant needs to experience them gradually, to notice them in real moments, rather than being presented with a complete image from the start. They will also test what they see, sometimes consciously, but often without realizing it. They may pull away to see if your stability remains. They may create distance to see if your independence holds. They may become difficult to see if your understanding and patience are real. These moments aren't always intentional, but they reveal whether what you offer is genuine or temporary. When these qualities are truly part of who you are, they don't disappear under pressure. They stay consistent, and that consistency is what builds trust. What's important to understand is that developing these traits benefits you regardless of any specific relationship outcome. Emotional stability, independence, depth, acceptance, reliability, and a sense of adventure are not just attractive qualities. They are the foundation of a fulfilling life. When someone genuinely embodies these traits, they don't just become appealing to an avoidant. They become capable of building strong, healthy connections with anyone. They carry a level of self-awareness and integrity that creates lasting compatibility instead of short-term attraction. The focus, then, isn't about trying to control someone or make them feel a certain way. It's about creating an environment where connection feels safe, balanced, and natural. When that happens, the avoidant doesn't feel pressured or threatened. They feel curious, they feel at ease, and most importantly, they feel open. And when an avoidant feels safe enough to stay open, that's when real connection begins to grow, not from force, not from strategy, but from a place where both people can exist fully as themselves while choosing each other along the way. When you look deeper into this dynamic, what stands out is that avoidants are not actually avoiding connection itself. They are avoiding the emotional pressure, unpredictability, and loss of control that they associate with it. Their behavior is less about not caring and more about protecting a version of connection that feels manageable. This is why the same person who seems distant can suddenly become attentive when the environment feels safe again. Their closeness is conditional, not on how much they feel, but on how secure they feel in expressing it. One important layer that often goes unnoticed is how strongly avoidants respond to emotional pacing. They are highly sensitive to how quickly things move. If the emotional intensity rises too fast, they instinctively pull back to regain balance. But when the connection unfolds slowly, with space to breathe, they begin to settle into it. This doesn't mean they lack depth. It means they need time to trust that the depth won't overwhelm them. The person who understands this doesn't try to accelerate intimacy, but allows it to build naturally, which ironically leads to a deeper bond over time. Another key aspect is how avoidants interpret emotional consistency. They don't just notice what you say or do in isolated moments, they observe patterns. If someone reacts differently each time, becomes unpredictable, or shifts emotionally based on circumstances, it reinforces their belief that relationships are unstable. But when someone shows a steady, grounded presence over time, it gradually lowers their internal guard. This is not something that happens instantly. It's built through repeated experiences where nothing feels forced, chaotic, or demanding. There's also a strong connection between avoidant behavior and control. For them, control equals safety. When they feel like they have control over their time, emotions, and level of involvement, they are more open to connection. The moment they feel like control is slipping, whether through expectations, pressure, or emotional dependency, they instinctively create distance. This is why giving them space is not about losing them. It's often what allows them to return. Space restores their sense of autonomy, which then makes closeness feel like a choice rather than an obligation. At the same time, avoidants are deeply responsive to respect. Not just basic respect, but respect for their boundaries, their pace, and their way of processing emotions. When someone tries to override those boundaries, even with good intentions, it creates resistance. But when someone honors them without resentment, it builds a quiet kind of trust. That trust becomes the foundation for everything that follows, because it shows them that the relationship doesn't require them to abandon themselves. There's also an interesting contradiction in how they experience emotional expression. While they may struggle to verbalize feelings, they often feel things intensely beneath the surface. The difference is that they process those emotions internally rather than externally. This means that what looks like indifference is often just unexpressed emotion. The person who understands this doesn't demand constant verbal reassurance, but learns to recognize patterns in behavior, consistency, effort, presence as signs of care. Another layer worth understanding is that avoidants are influenced heavily by contrast. When they experience a connection that feels calm, respectful, and pressure-free, it stands out sharply against past experiences that may have felt overwhelming or demanding. This contrast creates a kind of realization for them. They begin to see that connection doesn't have to come at the cost of their freedom. And once that belief starts to shift, their behavior starts to change as well. This isn't about trying to win someone over or fit into a role. It's about becoming a person who naturally creates space for real connection. When you build emotional stability, independence, curiosity, and authenticity within yourself, you stop chasing and start attracting what truly aligns. The connection that grows from this place feels effortless, balanced, and real. And whether it's with an avoidant or anyone else, it leads to something far deeper than attraction. It leads to genuine, lasting compatibility.